verses. Well, Isaac,
Rabbi, good afternoon. It's so good to see you.
so good to see you. So good to see you. Wow, the temptations, we got through them.
We got, we finally got
The
through.
devil
We
did not lead us astray through the temptations.
we finally got through them. That's right. Yeah.
One
In
can
fact,
almost say that just like Jesus got through them, we got through them.
mhm. Yeah. That's sometimes that's how I feel.
Yeah. Well, don't forget, it's easier to remember the Lucian ending that the devil had finished every test. He departed from him until an opportune time. So we should always be looking at our shoulders for our
Mhm.
good inclinations and our bad inclinations. Okay. So let's get started. The angels have been waiting on Jesus. We talked about that. Really unclear what it means. We saw some Jacob the patriarch parallels, what can mean to both a literal and a metaphoric sense have angels wait on you, but that's in the past. Let's get to some preaching in Galilee.
Mhm. So verses 12 onwards, right? The Gospel according to Saint Matthew, chapter 4, verses 12 onwards. Now, when he heard that John had been arrested, he withdrew into Galilee. And leaving Nazareth, he went and lived in Capernaum by the sea, in the territory of Zebulun and Naphtali.
Okay, so we could feel what it said in Isaiah, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we could go back to that probably tomorrow. So I guess the first question that we have to ask ourselves is when it says that Jesus heard that John had been arrested and he withdrew to Galilee, is that the cause of him going to Galilee? When it says that he went to Galilee, it's also, even when you look at Mark, it says, now after John was arrested, Jesus came to Galilee. It almost sounds like he was arrested, and it just so happens that Jesus went to Galilee. Is one the cause of the other, or are they just happening at the same time?
Okay, so the passage prior to this was the temptation. So is this saying that the temptation didn't happen in Galilee? So you're be saying that Jesus from Galilee, he came to be baptized by
Well,
John
we've
by the river
always
Jordan?
understood that the temptation took place somewhere in Perea or in the deserts, somewhere between the Galilee and Samaria area. It was always closer to the Dead Sea. So there definitely had to be a point when he left the end of the temptations and he went back to somewhere. It was never clear. I guess you're even pointing out a more basic question. When it says that he heard he was arrested and he withdrew to Galilee, or he came to Galilee, or returned to Galilee, depending on which of the Gospels we look at, where was he right then?
Yeah, yes. So or this concept of withdrawing to Galilee.
I mean, we
Does it
always
have?
we always understood that John has to be the baptizer, so he has to be near the Jordan, right? The Jordan we know is right between Perea and Samaria, and it runs through the Galilee, and that's where he moves to, namely Capernaum, in Hebrew Kfar Nachum, the village of Nachum, would have been on the northern seashore of the Sea of Galilee, which obviously the Jordan River runs through. So I just we assume that John was somewhere near the Jordan River, and I guess Galilee at least seems might have been when Herod Antipas arrested him. Might have been, I guess, getting away, right? Getting away from that area.
Okay, so you're saying, so this is what I'm hearing you say. Galilee was governed by somebody else.
Well,
In Jordan,
Galilee and Perea were headed by Herod Antipas, right?
and that's the son of Herod.
Yes.
Okay, so who was the king of Jordan or the places surrounding Jordan? Was it the same person or was it Philip?
So we mentioned when Herod died, the land was broken up, right?
Yeah. So we kind of forced to fill in the gaps. Now we know that when he heard that John had been arrested, he withdrew into Galilee. And from the other gospels, we know that John was arrested because Herod had taken his brother's wife, and John said you shouldn't take her. And then his stepdaughter does his great dance, and that led to his martyrdom or him being killed.
Right.
But all
Right. Exactly. So after Herod died, right? So we could break up the area into the I think different ethnarchs, right? So Augustus recognized that Herod's son, Herod Archelaus, was in
Yeah.
charge of Judea, Samaria, and Idumea, but we said Herod Antipas was in charge of Galilee and Perea, and we assume that John was somewhere near Perea when Herod died.
So this is the grandson of Herod the king. So when Jesus was born, there's a king called Herod, and after he died is when Mary and Joseph came back into Bethlehem. They came back to Galilee, and his son. So
Herod Antipas is the son of Herod, and he
yeah.
was in charge of Galilee and Perea. Perea is on the other side of the Jordan. And then the territories north and east of the Jordan were run by Philip. So we have three people. That's why it's sometimes called the tetrarchy, that they were ruling, namely Herod Antipas, Philip, and Herod Archelaus. And then and then a couple other areas under Salom. Anyways, so when Jesus heard that John was arrested, probably somewhere near the Jordan River, he withdrew, or he came, or he returned to Galilee. So what's important is that if we had to take a step back, what we would probably say about this verse is that he's getting away from John.
And
John is
that's
somewhere,
yeah,
and Jesus is somewhere else.
but that's the biggest question, right? Because in terms of based on the Gospel of Saint Matthew, there's been very limited interaction between John and Jesus. There's only
Right.
one interaction, so it's not like they had a very thick bond, right? And
Nonetheless,
then and then it says that after he was arrested, Jesus withdrew. So what is the what does John being arrested have to do with Jesus?
so a lot of
Or
times this is
or
where we
let me put it this way: what does evangelist want us to know that John was arrested, or the connection between John being arrested and Jesus withdrawing back into Galilee? Is that a fair
I
question?
yeah, I think first of all, I don't think we can answer the question from Mark alone. I think that's obvious. I think that we're supposed to understand that John and Jesus had some form of intimate relationship. That if John went down for some crime, from Herod Antipas's perspective, it's quite possible that Jesus, being a follower, would go down for that crime as well. And therefore, it is important, it seems, from the evangelist perspective, to separate the two, saying, why ever it is that John is about to be executed, which we know he's about to get executed for accusing or for whatever he's for his uprising, for whatever he did. We don't want to have the book of Matthew doesn't want to have Jesus mixed up in that. Okay, so on top of that, when it says he left Nazareth, it's really interesting because Nazareth, on the one hand, is in the Galilee. So
Hmm.
if I didn't have the verse right before that, I would have said he withdrew to the Galilee. He left Nazareth and made his home near Capernaum by the sea. So Capernaum is really, really interesting because number one, Capernaum was a famous city then. It's on the northern side of the Sea of Galilee. And, very famously, it's mentioned throughout the New Testament. It's mentioned in Matthew, it's mentioned in Mark, mentioned in Luke, mentioned in John. And it's a place where it's generally viewed as the hometown of many of the apostles, namely Simon, Peter, Andrew, James, John, and others. So the question is, when he went there, it almost seems like he's able to meet a lot of the apostles there. So this actually seems like a very fortuitous place for Jesus to flee to, considering that so many of his soon-to-be followers were already there. And to that, we have to ask the question: was Capernaum a city that was set up as almost like a Christian place at that time, or was it that Jesus made it into a special kind of place because of his presence?
Okay, so as a 21st century person living in New York City, I'm forced to ask a question. So he moved from Jordan to Galilee, to the district of
Uh,
Galilee, to the district of Galilee, and his hometown was Nazareth, but he didn't live there. He moved to Capernaum.
which,
So
which
it was
Capernaum, which he eventually cursed in
yeah, okay.
Matthew
So
11, 20.
there's this form of moving, right? So it says that he went and lived in Capernaum. Like, do people can just move and live? And he mean, I'm
Yeah,
What do you?
I don't see any very big problem. There were many rural and urban centers then. So when you have an urban center, it's a lot easier for someone to move, and especially if you're a preacher, it would have been common for someone to go and preach in different cities. So it doesn't seem to be a problem that he would have moved to Capernaum whatsoever, especially considering, at least since Hasmonean times, there would have been a residence for the Jewish people there.
And so, do these passages have any significance, or do these places, I should say, Capernaum in the territory of Zebulun and Naphtali, do they have any significance, or is it just
Well,
a place?
generally, Zvulun and Naphtali, these two places, are viewed more the outskirts from a Jewish geographical perspective. Generally, Samaria is viewed more like we'll say the heartland of the Jewish people. Will be around Jerusalem, will be around Hebron. To the south will be Beersheba. So Zvulun and Naphtali, the land are generally viewed like the boondocks. It's a place all the way out north that really you have to go to a different land to get to. So when the temple was destroyed, and then the Jews had to set up shop, really the Galilee became a much more vibrant place, at least from religious rabbinic text perspective, because it's kind of viewed almost as like a separate country, as we're seeing the Galilee versus Samaria. It's a very, very different kind of area. And I think when we're saying that Jesus went there, it's really meant to highlight the fact that he was going like away from the main religious first Jewish Roman war century kind of place, which we're going to see when the main battles that take place, are going to be throughout the country, obviously, once the Romans come in during the war between 66 and 73. But Jeff, everyone will view Jerusalem as like the hotbed of this place. So I think we're supposed to see it specifically as Jesus separating from John, and I think we're supposed to read into that as much as we possibly can.
So
And then
is this form of depression when John was being arrested, Jesus withdrawing away? Is this the human Jesus? Is this how he experienced depression?
listen, it's really hard to kind of overanalyze, because we really don't have to. Like, it's very clear that Matthew didn't want us to know too much. It could have said like literally any extra diction, any extra words would have helped us here. Saying Jesus heard that John was arrested and he freaked out. And he was sorrowful and he was mournful. Oh, he went to intervene. We would have taken anything, but we really get nothing. In any of the synoptics, we really get no additional information. And I think this is why many commentators will say that really Jesus was part of the John the Baptist movement, and therefore he was definitely endangered by the fact that John was arrested. And I think that would be like the easiest read over here, that it was a dangerous situation, the fact that John was arrested and Jesus had to go somewhere else.
There it does make sense, but it raises a bigger question because so far Jesus has not been public, and even if he was part of the John movement, he was not the only person. There were so many who came to John, right? The people the people from Jerusalem, they came to John to be baptized by John, and so at least going by Matthew, but the Gospel of Matthew, the interactions between Jesus and John is just it's only a one-time interaction for his baptism, and maybe he was
I
part
know,
of
but
his
we're
move.
given very scant detail of
Again,
the interactions. So it could be they had a million more interactions. In the end of the day, the
could
very
you?
fact that baptism is such an integral part of Christianity for most sects
Yeah.
just shows the long-term impact that John had on Jesus.
Could it also mean that when John was arrested, that this was a form of this that Jesus had some divine knowledge that his time has come, or could it
Uh,
be?
you're going to be more the expert in divine knowledge than me. I'm not going to know why anyone. I mean, even when you read the reason that John was arrested, that he condemned the king's marriage to Herodias as illegal because she was previously married to Philip. When you hear this out loud, you're almost like, what? Who cares? If anything, it almost feels like that this meant to be the story or what happened behind the story of him being a rebellious elder who was kind of undermining the social fabric of the time.
I'm surprised you say it's okay, right? Like within Judaism, that form of marriage is not okay, right? I mean,
No, no, no. I'm just saying, like, who cares? Like whenever I tell you someone gets killed, this person was killed for this, go like, he accused him of doing something that everyone knew was wrong. I mean, it just seems so weak.
Well, I mean, 21st century Americans, yeah, it seems weak, but I would imagine that for the first century Judaism, that
Was he
this
the
would have
only
been a
one?
big.
Did Herodias really just want John's head? Was John, again, I view this as almost like the excuse. John had to be whacked. And this is how it kind of was justified, because we see, at least in depending on which gospel, we see either the Pharisees or the Sadducees or the crowds were kind of going around him. And the Roman government at that time, under the Jewish vassal, couldn't tolerate such militancy against the norms. So that's how I view it, because it just seems like, oh, like who was John to accuse? Who cares? Let's say I accuse someone of something. You need to be someone. I don't know. Okay, well, I guess we'll see tomorrow what the land of Zulun and Naphtali has to do with the message. Okay, Isaac.
On that note, Rabbi, thank you. Feel better. Talk to you tomorrow.